Sundays had always been sacred in our family. It was the one day everyone tried to be home, no rushing, no distractions, just warm food and laughter echoing through the house. My daughter Elena and her husband Mark had promised to come for lunch, and I had spent the entire morning preparing their favorite dishes: roasted chicken, garlic bread, and that apple pie Elena loved since childhood. When they arrived, everything seemed perfect. Mark carried flowers, Elena hugged me tightly, and for a while I believed life was just as peaceful as it looked. We sat around the dining table, exchanging stories and teasing one another like old times. Mark was charming, as always, perhaps a little too charming, the way he always was when he wanted to hide something. The sun filtered gently through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on Elena's smiling face. I remember thinking how happy she looked, though there was something different about her lately, something I couldn't quite name. And then it happened. Mark's phone, lying on the table between us, started to buzz. I glanced at it out of instinct. The screen lit up bright, clear, impossible to ignore, and my breath caught in my throat. It said, "Elena read calling." For a split second, I thought I must have read it wrong. But the name and that little heart emoji were right there, staring at me. My daughter, the real Elena, was sitting right next to me, cutting a slice of pie. I looked at her, she froze, her knife midair. The color drained from her face. Her eyes darted toward the screen and then back at Mark. He lunged for the phone almost too quickly, fumbling to silence it, forcing a shaky laugh. "Spam call," he muttered. Must be one of those weird spoof numbers, but my heart didn't believe him. I saw the way his hands trembled, the guilt that flickered across his eyes. The silence that followed was suffocating. I tried to steady my breath, but the warmth of the moment had evaporated into cold suspicion. Elena forced a small laugh, trying to keep things normal. "Technology's strange these days," she said softly, avoiding my gaze. I didn't push further, but my mind was already spinning. After lunch, Mark went to take a phone call for work. I saw Elena staring at the garden through the window, her eyes distant, unfocused. I knew that look. I'd seen it once before, years ago, when her father and I were falling apart. It was the look of someone pretending everything was fine while their heart was quietly breaking. When they left later that evening, I stood by the door waving goodbye, the forced smiles lingering like ghosts. The house felt too empty, too quiet once the door shut behind them. I sat by the table, the untouched slice of apple pie still on the plate, and whispered to myself who was calling Mark. That night I couldn't sleep. The image of that glowing phone screen haunted me. Elena read calling. If my daughter was right there, who was the other Elena? A mother's heart can sense danger long before words reveal it. Something in my chest ached, a silent alarm ringing through my soul. I remembered the way Mark used to look at Elena with pride, admiration, devotion. But lately there was something distant, something calculated. In the darkness of my room, I made a quiet vow. I would find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't knock loudly. It creeps in through the smallest cracks, a phone call, a look, a lie told too casually. And as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I realized that single ring had shattered the illusion of a perfect marriage, and the echo of it was only the beginning. The following week passed in an easy silence. I tried convincing myself it had been a harmless mistake, maybe some strange coincidence, a wrong number saved under the wrong name. But my heart refused to rest. A mother's instinct never lies. It whispers when something is wrong, even when the world insists everything is fine. Elena stopped calling as often. When she did, her voice sounded distant, hollow. "I'm just tired, Mom," she said one evening when I asked if everything was okay. "Mark's been working a lot lately. We barely see each other." Her words should have sounded ordinary, but they didn't. I could hear something cracking behind them, a quiet pain she was too proud to reveal. One rainy afternoon, I decided to visit unannounced. I baked Elena's favorite blueberry muffins, wrapped them in a warm towel, and drove over to their house. When Mark opened the door, his expression flickered with surprise, the kind of surprise that isn't pleasant. "Mrs. Davis, what a nice surprise," he said, voice too bright, smile too stiff. "Thought I'd bring some muffins. Is Elena home?" He hesitated for a second too long. "She just went to the store," he said, but something didn't sit right. The hallway smelled faintly of perfume, not Elena's delicate lavender, but a stronger, heavier scent. My eyes wandered to the living room where a woman's scarf lay draped on the sofa, white silk with embroidered blue roses. I'd seen it before in one of Elena's best friend Mia's social media photos. My chest tightened. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company," I said, trying to sound casual. Mark's jaw clenched. A coworker dropped by to discuss a project. She just left. I smiled politely, though my heart was hammering. How thoughtful of her to leave her scarf behind, I murmured, watching him shift uncomfortably. That was all the confirmation I needed. I left soon after, the scent of that perfume following me out like a haunting whisper. As I drove home, my mind raced. Could it really be Mia, the same girl who had spent countless nights at our home, eating dinner with us, laughing with Elena, sharing secrets? That evening, I called Elena. She sounded distracted. "Oh, Mom, I've been meaning to call you. Work's been crazy. Mia's been so busy, too, we haven't talked in weeks." The name hit me like ice. So, Mia was busy. I didn't have the heart to tell her what I suspected. Not yet. She needed truth, not half guesses. And for that, I would have to find proof. From that day on, I watched quietly, gathering pieces of a puzzle that neither of them knew I was assembling. I noticed how Mark became more protective of his phone, how he started leaving earlier for business meetings, and coming home late smelling of unfamiliar cologne. Elena began to lose weight. The glow in her eyes dimmed. She laughed less, spoke less. And though she tried to hide it, I saw the pain etched in her every gesture. One night, after she'd gone home from visiting me, I sat alone at the kitchen table and whispered into the empty room. "I raised you to love deeply, my child, but I never taught you what to do when love becomes poison." That's when I made my decision. I wouldn't confront Mark, not yet. I would gather every truth, every hidden piece of betrayal he thought he could bury. Because love may blind a daughter, but it sharpens a mother's eyes. I didn't know then how dark the truth would be, or how far betrayal could reach. But one thing I knew for certain, that phone call wasn't a mistake. It was a message, and I was ready to listen. The days that followed were a blur of quiet suspicion. Every smile Mark gave seemed rehearsed, every word rehearsed and hollow. I could see the cracks widening, even if Elena couldn't. She was still clinging to the image of a husband she thought she knew. The one who used to surprise her with flowers and cook breakfast on Sundays. But love makes fools of the purest hearts. One evening, after weeks of watching and waiting, I decided I couldn't bear the silence any longer. I asked Elena to come over for dinner, hoping to gently open the door to the truth. She arrived late, her eyes swollen and red. I didn't ask, she didn't explain. We ate in silence. When I finally spoke, my voice trembled. "Sweetheart, are you happy?" She froze, the fork halfway to her mouth. "Of course, Mom. Why do you ask?" "Because," I said softly, "you don't look it anymore." Her lips quivered, and for a moment I saw her walls crumble. Tears filled her eyes. Mark's been different lately, distant, always on his phone. Sometimes he leaves in the middle of the night for work emergencies. I try not to doubt him, but... She trailed off, wiping her tears quickly. I don't want to be paranoid. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not paranoid. You're hurting, and that's your heart telling you something's wrong." That night, after she left, I decided to find proof not for me, but for her. The next morning, I visited their house again while Mark was at work. Elena was out shopping, and she'd given me her spare key months ago. My hands shook as I entered their home. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but a mother's love often means stepping into the fire to save her child. I began searching carefully, not to invade, but to understand. The study room smelled faintly of his cologne. On the desk, I found receipts, hotel stays, dinners for two, a jewelry purchase that Elena had never mentioned. My heart thudded painfully as I flipped through them. Then, tucked between some papers, I found an envelope. Inside were printed photos, Mark and a woman. Her face was turned slightly away in most of them, but in one, I saw her clearly. Mia, Elena's best friend, the one who used to sit at our table and call me second mom. I felt the air leave my lungs. My knees almost gave out. Betrayal had never tasted so bitter. I wanted to scream, to destroy every trace of those pictures, but I stopped myself. Not yet. I needed Elena to see the truth with her own eyes. That evening, I asked her to come over again. She looked tired, fragile. I made her tea the way I did when she was a child after a nightmare. Then I slid the photos across the table. Her hand trembled as she lifted them. For a moment she didn't breathe. Then a sob escaped her lips, raw, broken, the sound of a soul shattering. "No, no, this can't be real," she whispered, tears spilling freely. "She was my friend. He was my husband." I took her into my arms as she collapsed against me. "I know, my love, I know." She cried for hours that night, not just for her marriage, but for the friendship that had betrayed her more deeply than any lie. And when her tears finally dried, her face changed. Gone was the gentle, hopeful Elena. In her place was a woman quietly burning with strength. She looked up at me, eyes steady and cold. "Mom," she said, her voice low and trembling with resolve, "they took my trust, but they'll never take my peace. I'm going to make them both regret it." And in that moment, I saw it, the spark of revenge born not out of hatred, but out of pain and dignity. The daughter who once cried in my arms had just begun her transformation. When the truth finally surfaced, Elena changed overnight. The trembling in her voice was gone. In its place lived a calm strength that even grief couldn't shake. "I'm done crying, Mom," she told me the next morning. "Now they'll feel what they've done." She didn't lash out or shout. Instead, she smiled, cooked Mark's favorite meals, and pretended to adore him even more. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple again. But beneath that quiet smile, she was crafting her revenge piece by piece. Mark had been talking for months about starting a new business. Elena encouraged him, offering to handle the legal side. "Let's register it together," she said sweetly. He was too confident, too careless, and let her fill out the forms. Every paper carried his signature, but every line of ownership bore her name alone. While she played her part, I had my own mission. I gathered the photos, the messages, and the receipts that proved his affair with Mia. I sent them anonymously to Mia's workplace. Within a week, she was suspended. Her proud reputation turned to whispers and pity. When the time came, Elena invited Mark's close friends to a dinner celebrating their business launch. He was glowing with pride, toasting his amazing wife. She raised her glass too, to new beginnings, she said softly, sliding a folder across the table. Mark opened it and froze. The documents stared back at him. Elena Parker, sole owner and director. "What is this?" he stammered. "The company you said we'd build together." She replied evenly. "You used my savings and my trust, so I made sure it belongs to me, legally." The guest shifted awkwardly as the color drained from his face. Elena kept her tone gentle. "And you might want to call Mia. I hear she'll have plenty of free time now." He tried to speak, but no words came. The man who once believed he controlled everything suddenly looked very small. That night, Elena packed her things and left. No screaming, no tears, just silence and dignity. When she walked through my front door, I saw not a broken woman, but a reborn one. Weeks later, the divorce papers were signed. Mark lost both his marriage and the business he thought was his triumph. Elena kept the company, expanded it, and turned it into something successful, something that was entirely hers. Now, every Sunday, she visits me with the same warm smile she had as a little girl, only wiser, steadier. Sometimes we sit in the garden, drinking tea in the golden light, and she'll say, "Funny, isn't it, Mom? How a single phone call can change everything." And I smile, knowing that ring, the one that once shattered our peace, became the sound of her liberation. Because in the end, the sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's living well after betrayal dies.